Hi, all. Happy Monday to you. Happy spring break, whatever that may mean at this point, and welcome to week 3 of our course. And really, by my accounts, week 3 of the COVID-19 crisis, at least in our area. I suppose week 2 for a lot of us in terms of things being shut down, but as I look back through my records, it was about March 10th that we started to get an intensifying conversation about what was happening. And if you recall, it's really helpful to me to look back at all of our videos, but my very first video, I was in Denver for a volleyball tournament. I was supposed to go that next weekend for another one, but that one was canceled. But when we were in Denver that weekend, there was conversation about it, and people weren't high-fiving as much, and there was a little bit of hand sanitizer around, but it really hadn't started in full force till probably about March 10th-ish is what I'm deducing. I'd be curious to hear your dates, what you think it might be. Anyway, week 3, digging into the content. I, like you, am pretty excited to be in this course together and looking at these materials. And I want you considering yourself not just a participant in all that's going on, and certainly you are, and you need to practice some kind of self-care. I know a lot of you are working, so God bless you if you're heading to work or even working at home as I am. It doesn't mean that the hours are reduced, and I'm sort of envious of those people who are talking about streaming Netflix. I'm hoping I get a chance to do that at some point. So far, not happening. Lots and lots of work to do, but I'm thankful for work, so that's fine. Anyway, what I hope that you're able to do is not only be a participant, but consider yourself an observer and an educated observer, one who is reading materials about these kinds of things, not COVID-19, but certainly communication, social media, how we are interacting with each other, how we have in the past, and how we might be now. It's often difficult to analyze it very well when you're right in the middle of it, but you can be observing. So one thing I want you to watch for is, I'm always fascinated by language acquisition. So back when I was in my undergraduate years in the 80s and even high school before that and my graduate work after that, the way that language acquisition typically happened in the United States is a new word would come into play through the media. Now, erase from your head our current idea of what the media is. I think I've told you, I can't remember if I've talked to this class about it, but I was trained initially as a journalist. So that's my first training, was as a news reporter. Then I worked as a news reporter. I worked for the Chicago Tribune for a little while. I worked for various wire services downtown Chicago. I worked in Washington and in Oregon. And in my training, we had classes in media law, in media ethics. We had small groups and role playing, and it was very strict what we were and were not allowed to do. So it was a whole different world in terms of journalism. But there was also a sense that the language was held dear by those who, particularly in the newspapers, were writing it every day. And if a new word emerged in the culture, or a reporter somehow came up with a new word to describe a new situation, it would go into the papers, it would be repeated, and then it was fascinating to watch because slowly it would become a part of our conversations because we would all take a daily paper, we would all read it and talk about it, or you'd see it on the nightly news if you watched it or heard it on the radio, whatever your medium might be, not the internet. This is all pre-internet. And eventually that word becomes a part of our language. It enters the dictionaries and it just becomes commonplace. And a lot of times we forget where it even came from, which is fascinating to me. So that's what something like the Oxford English Dictionary is good for. You can look up the etymology of a word, which just means the history, to see when it first appeared in our language. Sometimes we think language is just language. It's stagnant, and it is what it was, somehow miraculously created, generations and generations ago, and it's what we use to communicate. And that's actually not really the case. So language is constantly fluid and moving and shifting with the times. And is it dictating who we are and how we think, or are we dictating it and what it becomes? That's a little bit of both. And it can be a little bit scary if you dig too deeply into it and realize that if I don't have a word in my language, I'm probably not going to think that thought or experience that emotion. Because if I can't articulate it, even in my own brain, the learning doesn't sink in the same way that if I experience something. Those of you who've been through the PLA class, remember the Kolb model? You experience something. You articulate what it was in very objective ways in your own brain. This is what happened to me or to somebody else. And then you are able to articulate whatever the emotions were that go around that, because we are emotional human beings, and that's okay. We have to own that. Then you articulate what you actually learned from it. From that situation, from those emotions, I learned ABC. And then you learn to teach out of what that experience was. So that's sort of the learning model that we go through every time. And that's what language acquisition can be as well. These new words come into our language and then it becomes a part of who we are. But if we haven't gone through that process, if we don't even have a word for what we want to express, then are we locked in what a philosopher named Jameson called the prison house of language? Are we locked into something where we actually can't think or experience whatever it is might be that's out there because we simply don't have the words for it? Fascinating. This is where I get a little bit nerdy about these things. But here's what I want you thinking about as a observer, not just a participant in this coronavirus crisis. What new language is coming into our vocabulary that amazingly wasn't even there for some of us a week and a half ago? That's how quickly this is going. The days can seem long for some of us or short for some of you who are trying to get lots done, but it's only been not quite 2 weeks really that we've been fully in this, and these new words are coming up. So can you think of some? I mean, certainly coronavirus, the name itself, but panic buying. Now, if you were studying economics, probably out there, but it's not something that I was certainly using regularly in my vocabulary or had it impact my family where, oh, when I go to the store now, these things aren't available, so I can't cross those off my list. I could always cross my list off, right? Maybe I had to go to 2 stores sometimes, but now, no, there are things that I may have to wait a month. I might have to wait 2 months because there were people who were panic buying and stockpiling. Fascinating. So this is a new term that we're becoming comfortable with. Certainly social distancing. And I just saw something, I've forgotten what news feed it was from just a few minutes ago. Frankly, I think it was the BBC that said, hold this device. And they're assuming that we're all seeing the news update on a smartphone. Where's my smartphone? It's right here. Hold this device 3 feet away from you. Now double that, and that is proper social distancing. And this is not just a new American phrase or vocabulary world. This is coming from the BBC. This is worldwide, these kinds of phrases that are coming into our language. Flattening the curve. It's not completely new language. And for some of us, yes, we understand the bell curve. We understand, we need to bring that down. But it's becoming very commonplace where you're hearing everybody talk in that way. This notion of community spread. Maybe something that we've talked about as we've seen measles hit where people are not vaccinated and start to spread, or certainly the flu, but it's becoming a more natural part of our conversation. We need to avoid community spread. How about shelter in place? Might have been something that you'd heard before, but to use as a regular daily part of trying to explore what that means. What does the governor of Oregon mean by that? Wherever you might live or have lived, how are they defining that? And are they defining it differently? Because then it gets confusing how we're communicating with one another. So what actually does it mean to shelter in place? I don't think that's entirely clear yet. It might be by the end of today. It might be tomorrow. This idea of stay home, stay healthy, which is kind of a little phrase that our governor of Oregon came up with. But I wonder how we would have heard that 2 weeks ago. Stay home, stay healthy. What does that mean? If I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to get out and I'm going to do things, right? Self-quarantine. What does that mean? Well, of course, we now know what it means, but what did it mean to us, or what might it have meant to us 2 weeks ago? Essential businesses. This whole idea of what is essential and what is not is fascinating to explore. So I want you thinking about these things as you're participating and observing in what is going on around you, and certainly in the culture. Blessings on your week. If you have any questions at all about your papers, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm here. I'm easily available over email. Please take note in the syllabus that you do have the option to do a revision at any point until our last day of the course. It is listed under a paragraph called revisions in the syllabus, and you can see the instructions there on how to do that. Please make sure you read the instructions. Don't just resubmit something. You need to follow what I'm asking for. But you have the opportunity to raise any paper by a full letter grade if you complete a revision. So my goal is that you're learning what I'm looking for, you're learning what APA standards are, what grammatical standards are, and you're able to rise to and get whatever grade in this class you hope to earn. I don't want you to be weighted by the grade. I want you digging into the materials and responding appropriately and fully and enjoying this time together. We're really creating sort of a microcosm in our 8 weeks together of what is our journey through this coronavirus together. So blessings on you as you do your good work, as you minister to your families, as you hunker down and just try to stay positive and joyful and healthy. God bless.